On a scorching August afternoon in 2020, the serene image of Cedar Creek's suburban life was shattered in a way that would haunt the town for years. At the center of this tragedy were the Wilkersons. Benjamin, a 46-year-old corporate lawyer known for his relentless work ethic and involvement in local charities, and his wife, Olivia, a 44-year-old part-time art instructor with a radiant personality and a contagious smile. They had been integral members of the Cedar Creek community for over 10 years, their seemingly perfect marriage the envy of many. Next door lived the Myers family, Alice, a widowed librarian, and her 20-year-old son Eric, a college junior back home for the summer. The Myers had moved to Cedar Creek 5 years earlier. While they were somewhat reserved, they were generally well regarded by their neighbors. No one could have foreseen how these seemingly ordinary lives would collide in such a catastrophic way. Benjamin Wilkerson had always been driven by ambition. Born to middle-class parents in a small town in Kansas, he had climbed the social ladder through sheer determination and an almost obsessive work ethic. By his early 30s, he was a rising star at a prominent law firm, admired by his colleagues for his sharp legal mind and by his clients for his straightforward approach. Olivia Bennett, as she was known before marriage, had a different trajectory. The daughter of a university professor and a painter, she grew up in a home that valued creativity and self-expression. She initially pursued a career in contemporary dance, but a knee injury in her final year of college led her to pivot toward art instruction and wellness coaching. The early years of their marriage were marked by happiness and prosperity. Benjamin's career continued to soar, and he took great pride in providing Olivia with the life he believed she deserved. Olivia, in turn, threw herself into the role of the perfect corporate spouse, hosting dinner parties and attending social events that were crucial for Benjamin's memory. She also began teaching part-time art classes at an upscale gallery, finding fulfillment in helping others explore their creativity. However, as the years went by, cracks began to appear in their meticulously crafted life. Benjamin's work hours grew longer, his ambition driving him to pursue ever more significant cases and clients. He was rarely home before 9 p.m., and even when he was physically present, his mind seemed elsewhere, constantly checking his phone for emails or legal updates. Olivia, now approaching her mid-40s, found herself feeling increasingly restless. The art classes and community events that once filled her days now felt hollow and unfulfilling. She began to question the choices that had led her to this point, wondering if she had traded her dreams for a life that had become a gilded cage. The couple's inability to have children, despite years of trying, added another layer of strain to their relationship. By the summer of 2020, the Wilkersons' marriage was a carefully maintained facade. To the outside world, they still appeared to be the golden couple. Benjamin continued to excel at work, recently winning a major case that positioned him for a partnership at his firm. Olivia's art classes were more popular than ever, her students drawn to her warmth and apparent serenity. But behind closed doors, they were virtually strangers. Conversations, when they happened, were perfunctory and centered around schedules and obligations. Physical intimacy had become a rare occurrence, each touch laden with unspoken resentments, unmet expectations. The Myers had moved into the house next to the Wilkersons in 2015, following the death of Alice Myers' husband, Dr. Gregory Myers, a well-respected cardiologist. Gregory had succumbed to the very illness he had spent his career treating, leaving Alice to raise their son, Eric, alone. Alice, a soft-spoken librarian, initially struggled to adjust to life in the new community. Moving from their modest home in Toledo had been a necessary escape from the memories that haunted every corner of their old house. However, Cedar Creek, with its affluent suburbia, felt alien to her. She found solace in her books and in tending to the garden, which quickly became the envy of the neighborhood. Eric Myers was 15 when they moved in, a lanky, introverted teenager who was more comfortable with computers than people. The transition to a new school had been tough. He often found himself the target of bullies who mocked his second-hand clothes and quiet demeanor. It was during this challenging period that Benjamin Wilkerson had taken an interest in Eric, offering him a job mowing lawns and doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. Over the next 5 years, Eric blossomed into a confident young man, excelling in his computer science studies at university. Despite his growing confidence, Eric remained devoted to his mother, worrying about her isolation and loneliness. He made a point of coming home most weekends, even when his friends had plans for parties or road trips. It was on one of these weekend visits in early July that he first saw Olivia Wilkerson in a new light. Alice had always been grateful for the Wilkersons' kindness, particularly Olivia's efforts to include her in neighborhood activities. She often spoke of Olivia's generosity, unaware of the complex emotions brewing beneath the surface of her son's polite nods. The spark that ignited the affair between Olivia Wilkerson and Eric Myers was as unexpected as it was intense. It happened on a warm evening in early July during one of the Wilkersons' famous summer barbecues. Benjamin, as usual, was holding court near the grill, entertaining his colleagues with stories of his latest legal victories. Olivia, feeling particularly isolated amid the crowd, had retreated to the quiet of the pool house to refill the ice bucket. Eric, who had reluctantly accompanied his mother to the party, chose that moment to escape the noise and forced socializing. He entered the pool house, not realizing it was occupied, and found Olivia struggling with a heavy bag of ice. Their eyes met, and in that instant, something shifted. Eric moved to help her with the ice, their hands brushing briefly. They stood there momentarily, the cold of the ice contrasting sharply with the unexpected heat building between them. It was Olivia who broke the silence, her voice husky as she thanked him. Eric, usually articulate, found himself stammering in response. That brief encounter set the stage for what was to come. Over the next few weeks, Olivia and Eric began to find reasons to be in each other's company. It started innocently enough, Olivia asking Eric for help with her computer, Eric offering to assist with her garden. Each interaction was charged with an undercurrent of attraction that they both tried to ignore. Their first kiss happened almost a month after the barbecue. Eric had been helping Olivia set up for one of her art classes in the local park. As they finished, a sudden summer storm broke out. They ran for shelter under a nearby gazebo, laughing and breathless as the rain poured down around them. Olivia looked at Eric and felt a surge of desire she hadn't experienced in years. Before she could think better of it, she leaned in and kissed him. From that point, their affair escalated quickly. They were reckless, driven by a mix of Eric's youthful passion and Olivia's desperation to feel alive again. They met in secluded spots around Cedar Creek, in the back row of the local movie theater, a quiet corner of the public library, and most dangerously, in the Wilkerson home when Benjamin was at work. Each encounter left them craving more, their age gap forgotten in the intensity of their stolen moments. Olivia felt rejuvenated, rediscovering parts of herself she thought were long gone. Eric, for his part, was intoxicated by Olivia's experience and the forbidden nature of their relationship. But as the summer wore on, the strain of maintaining their secret began to show. Close calls became more frequent, a neighbor almost catching them in an embrace, a suspicious glance from Alice when Olivia's name came up too often in conversation. The guilt, too, began to weigh on them. Eric struggled with the knowledge that he was betraying Benjamin, a man who had been nothing but kind to him. Olivia found herself lying more and more to her husband, each deception another crack in the foundation of her marriage. On August 12, 2020, the day dawned hot and humid, with an ominous air hinting at an impending storm. It was a Tuesday, and Cedar Creek was waking up to another day of routines and responsibilities. For Benjamin Wilkerson, it started like any other. He woke up early, put on one of his finely tailored suits, and left for the office before Olivia had even stirred from her sleep. Olivia awoke later, her mind already buzzing with plans for the day. Benjamin had informed her the night before that he would be working late an important client dinner that could solidify his partnership deal. For Olivia, this presented an opportunity. She texted Eric, her heart racing as she suggested he come over in the afternoon. Eric, who had been agonizing over the affair for days, saw the message as a chance to end things face to face. He replied with a simple okay, resolving to break it off before the situation spiraled any further out of control. The day crawled by slowly for both of them. Olivia went through her morning art class with a nervous energy that her students couldn't help but notice. Meanwhile, at his summer job, Eric struggled to focus on the lines of code on his screen, his mind constantly drifting to thoughts of Olivia and the difficult conversation ahead. At 3:00 p.m., Eric made his way to the Wilkerson home, glancing around cautiously to ensure none of the neighbors were watching. Olivia quickly ushered him inside, her face flushed with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Eric was the first to speak, trying to say they needed to talk, but Olivia, misinterpreting his intention and driven by a desperate need to feel desired, cut him off with a passionate kiss. Despite his reservations, Eric found himself responding, his resolve weakening in the face of Olivia's intensity. What happened next was a blur of discarded clothes and tangled limbs as they made their way to the master bedroom. All thoughts of ending the affair were momentarily forgotten as they lost themselves in each other. Meanwhile, across town, Benjamin sat in his office, frowning at his computer screen. The figures for his client presentation were not adding up, and he realized he would have to redo a significant portion of his work. Frustration mounting, he made a snap decision. He would go home to regroup and return to the office later to finish up before the dinner. At 4:15 p.m., Benjamin's car pulled into the driveway. He noticed Eric's old Toyota parked a little way down the street, but thought nothing of it, probably helping Alice with something, he mused as he unlocked the front door. The house was quiet as Benjamin entered, but something felt off. A half-empty glass of wine sat on the coffee table, unusual for Olivia at this hour. Then he heard it, a muffled sound coming from upstairs. Frowning, he climbed the stairs, the noise growing louder as he approached the master bedroom. What Benjamin saw when he opened the door would be seared into his memory forever. His wife, the woman he had loved for 15 years, was in their bed with Eric Mears, the 20-year-old young man he had mentored and trusted. With a roar of rage and pain, Benjamin lunged forward, his hands so accustomed to manipulating legal documents and shaking hands on business deals now clenched into fists. He grabbed Eric, yanking him off the bed. Olivia screamed, scrambling to cover herself and separate the two men, but her efforts were in vain. Benjamin's first punch caught Eric squarely in the jaw, sending the younger man stumbling backward. Fueled by adrenaline and fear, Eric tried to fight back. The two men grappled, crashing into the dresser, sending framed photos and knickknacks scattering across the floor. In the chaos, no one noticed the heavy crystal bookend that fell from the dresser's top. No one saw it until Benjamin, in a blind fit of rage, grabbed it and brought it down on Eric's head with a sickening thud. The sound echoed in the sudden silence that followed. Eric crumpled to the floor, blood pooling rapidly around his motionless form. Olivia's scream pierced the air as the full horror of what had just happened struck them. As storm clouds gathered outside and sirens wailed in the distance, the lives of everyone involved changed irrevocably. The idyllic facade of Cedar Creek had been shattered, and nothing would ever be the same again. The piercing wail of police sirens shattered the usual tranquility of the neighborhood. Curious neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains, their expressions a mixture of concern and curiosity, as police cars and an ambulance screeched to a halt in front of the Wilkerson residence. The first officers on the scene were met with a tableau of horror they would never forget. Benjamin Wilkerson, covered in blood, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands, looking shell-shocked. Olivia, barely clothed and hysterical, stood in the corner of the room. The room bore all the signs of a violent struggle: overturned furniture, shattered glass, and blood smears on the hardwood floor. Detective Claire Reynolds, a seasoned veteran of the Cedar Creek Police Department's homicide unit, took charge of the scene. Her first priority was to get medical attention for Eric Myers. As paramedics worked feverishly to stabilize him, Reynolds began piecing together the chaotic series of events that had led to this moment. Benjamin, still in shock, was taken into custody without resistance. Olivia was questioned separately, her fragmented and emotional story painting a picture of a long-simmering marital discord that had erupted into violence. As the news spread throughout the neighborhood, a crowd began to gather outside the police cordon. Among them was Alice Myers, who collapsed in grief upon being informed of her son's critical condition. She was quickly taken to the hospital, where Eric was fighting for his life in the intensive care unit. The investigation moved swiftly. Forensics teams combed through the Wilkerson home, collecting evidence and taking photographs. The crystal book, and now a potential murder weapon, was carefully bagged and tagged. Neighbors were interviewed, and their statements added context to the relationships between the Wilkersons and the Myers family. One neighbor recalled hearing raised voices from the Wilkerson house earlier that afternoon, but dismissed it as the television being too loud. Another mentioned seeing Eric enter the Wilkerson home around 3:00 p.m., finding it odd given Benjamin's typical work schedule. As night fell, the gravity of the situation became clear. Eric Myers was pronounced dead at 10:02 p.m., never having regained consciousness. The charge against Benjamin Wilkerson was elevated from assault to second-degree murder. In the days that followed, more details emerged. Olivia, racked with guilt and facing intense scrutiny, admitted to the affair with Eric. Her statement, given through tears at the police station, provided a timeline of their relationship and the events leading up to that fateful afternoon. Benjamin, advised by his hastily retained attorney, remained silent. His colleagues at the law firm described a man under immense pressure, working long hours to secure a partnership that had seemed just within reach. None, however, had suspected the depth of his marital troubles or his capacity for violence. The case against Benjamin Wilkerson was building, but Detective Reynolds knew that in the court of public opinion, there would be no clear villains or heroes in this story, only victims, each in their own way, of the secrets and lies that had finally come to light in the most devastating manner possible. The trial of Benjamin Wilkerson began on a crisp winter morning 6 months after the tragic events that had rocked Cedar Creek. The county courthouse, an imposing structure of red brick and white columns, was surrounded by reporters and onlookers eager to witness the proceedings. Inside, the tension was palpable as the judge called the court to order. Prosecuting attorney Margaret Blake, known for her tenacity and sharp intellect, laid out the state's case in her opening statement. She painted a vivid picture of Benjamin Wilkerson as a man consumed by rage and jealousy, who had brutally murdered a young man in the prime of his life. Blake's words were precise and impactful, her gaze sweeping across the jury as she promised to prove Benjamin's guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. Defense attorney Robert Sterling countered with a narrative of his own, portraying Benjamin as a devoted husband and a respected community member pushed to the brink by a profound betrayal. Sterling suggested that the death was a tragic accident, the result of a confrontation that had spiraled out of control. As the trial progressed, a parade of witnesses took the stand. Forensic experts testified about blood spatter patterns and the force required to cause Eric Myers' fatal injury. Neighbors recounted the events of that fateful day, and character witnesses spoke to the personalities and reputations of both Benjamin and Eric. But it was Olivia Wilkerson's testimony that captivated the courtroom. Over 2 grueling days on the stand, she laid bare the disintegration of her marriage and the evolution of her relationship with Eric. Her voice trembled as she described the moment Benjamin walked in on them, and the horror of watching the confrontation unfold. Under cross-examination, Sterling tried to paint her as an unfaithful wife whose actions had driven her husband to temporary insanity, but Olivia held firm, accepting her part in the tragedy while insisting that nothing justified Eric's death. Alice Myers' testimony was brief but powerful. Still grief-stricken, she spoke of her son's kindness and dreams for the future, all cut short in an act of senseless violence. Her quiet dignity in the face of unimaginable loss moved many in the courtroom to tears. As the trial neared its conclusion, all eyes turned to Benjamin Wilkerson. Against his lawyer's advice, he chose to take the stand. His testimony was a study in contrast, moments of apparent remorse interspersed with flashes of the anger that had led to Eric's death. He spoke of the pressure he had been under at work, the growing distance in his marriage, and the shock of discovering his wife's infidelity. When describing the fight with Eric, Benjamin claimed he had never intended to cause serious harm, that he had simply lost control. Expert witnesses in the field of psychology were called to provide insight into the minds of those involved in the tragic events. Dr. Laura Cho, a clinical psychologist, explained that Benjamin's actions could be understood through the lens of what psychologists call intermittent explosive disorder, characterized by episodes of violent, aggressive behavior disproportionate to the situation. She pointed to Benjamin's high-stress job, unexpressed marital dissatisfaction, and the shock of discovering his wife's infidelity as contributing factors to his violent outburst. However, under cross-examination, Dr. Cho conceded that while these factors could explain Benjamin's behavior, they did not excuse it. She emphasized that many individuals face similar stressors without resorting to violence. The defense called a specialist in marriage and family therapy to testify about the psychological impact of infidelity. Dr. Michael Friedman described the profound sense of betrayal and loss of identity that a person may experience upon discovering a spouse's affair, likening it to a form of psychological trauma capable of triggering extreme emotional responses. The psychological analyses presented during the trial offered a complex picture of human behavior and motivation, highlighting how a combination of personal history, societal expectations, and immediate circumstances can collide to create a perfect storm of tragedy. After 7 exhausting weeks of testimony, evidence presentation, and legal arguments, the fate of Benjamin Wilkerson rested in the hands of the jury. As Judge Blackwell sent the 12 jurors to deliberate, a tense silence fell over the courtroom. Following a few hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Benjamin Wilkerson was found guilty of second-degree murder, but with mitigating circumstances. In her sentencing remarks, Judge Blackwell cited the violent nature of the crime, balanced against Benjamin's lack of prior criminal history and the unique circumstances of the case. She sentenced him to 18 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 12 years. As Benjamin was led away in handcuffs, the full weight of the tragedy seemed to descend upon the courtroom. There were no victors here, only lives irrevocably altered by a moment of passion and a split second of violence.